The lecture in Gibeon today is basically more about advocacy. Of course, we are still commemorating Africa Day, and most certainly because of the theme of the year this year, which resonates with us domestically in Namibia. We are the theme of the year of the African Union for Africa this year is reparations for the African people and people of African descent, for colonialism, apartheid, transatlantic slavery, and genocide. And so the theme of the title of the lecture today is envisioning reparations for genocide victims. So part of what we are doing is part of our domestic advocacy strategy to basically inform the Namibian people on what reparations are and what reparations look like and where it has happened and why we deserve that. We've realized that we have done a great work of advocacy internationally, but the Namibian people, especially the victims, only know of the basics of things but are not necessarily well versed in the question of the genocide, the historical question of what happened, and what is this reparations that we talk about, that we advocate for, and what does it look like, perhaps so that they can know what they deserve, and as to not to just take anything that is offered at the table or what is owed to them as victims of genocide, and what restorative justice actually means and what it entails, and basically.
Right. So when we talk about genocide in the Namibian context, what exactly are we referring to specifically?
Between the years of the year 1904 and the 1905, after the natives of Namibia, the Herero and the Nama communities revolted against the German imperial administration at the time, the Germany retaliated through its one of its generals, von Trotter, that issued extermination orders against these two communities. And the reasoning was that the only way that we can get these natives to subject to German authorities is by the barrel of the gun. We have to annihilate all of them to create living space for the civilized nation of Germany. And so mass killings took place. Mass killings took place. A large amount of land expropriated. The survivors were kept in concentration camps where they were worked and starved to death, and this was all just to reinforce the German authority in German Southwest Africa. And so genocide, why we qualify that as genocide is because we look at the definition of genocide by the United Nations Convention, the Convention of 1945 of the Prevention and the Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And its definition states that genocide is the killings of the people, targeted killings of a group of people, whether in half or in whole, based on their ethnicity, religion, amongst other issues. And so the killings then of 1904 to 1908 were qualified as a genocide. And so when we speak of that genocide, then we are reminiscing the historical injustices that qualify as genocide that were perpetrated towards these communities. We also know that there was a genocide declared in 1911 against the High Comstown, in the northern central part of Namibia, where an order was issued for them to be gunned down like animals because the Germans at that time wanted to create what we call the Etosha National Park today, and also more living space for themselves. And so it's the genocide in the event that happened in the post-independent, in the pre-independent state of Namibia, definitely qualified as genocide, and that is what we are referring to.
Right.
The unfortunate thing is how it has affected all Namibians today, while a genocide that was targeted at these two communities and different effects. And so most of when we call it a Namibian genocide, I think, to my understanding, is calling on all Namibians, as much as it was the Namas and the Herero that were genocided, something that we need to be clear and also teach the Namibians about, is that we want solidarity, where the genocide victims cannot just get solidarity from the international world and not get it from the Namibians. As much as you and the rest of the Namibians were not genocided, trust me, it affects you in several ways that you perhaps do not see. And so, yeah, that is basically what we mean.
Yeah, while you are on that point, I mean, how would you, or can you explain to us how the historical genocide of the Herero and Nama people has impacted communities today?
It's the impacts are quite complex, and they have rippled down to the generations after. The Nama and Herero communities today, first of all, are permanent minorities. This is as a consequence of the large numbers of massacred people that took place. You have the Herero that were killed, and only 15,000 Hereros were left. This equates to only about 10% of them, and then 20% of them, and then you have the Nama communities that who were annihilated massively, and therefore only half of them, only half of the actual Nama or numbers of the Nama communities were left. This then left them in a status of a permanent minority, where when it comes to political decision, amongst others, economic opportunities, as a minority, they don't necessarily have the majority voice anymore to actually stand up for themselves. And we know that politics, of course, runs in the world, and that is a big disadvantage. The Herero and Nama communities today are in abject poverty, most of them, as a consequence of this transgenerational transfer, or as a consequence of this transfer of wealth at that time. The generations thereafter then are subjected to abject poverty because they have to start from first. These are two nations that had wealth of themselves, large land. They had large herds of animals, and that they owned, and we know that land and animals were the economic commodity that they lived on at that time. And so the loss of land, the loss of animals, we have psychological issues that have basically manifested in ways that many of the other Namibians do not understand, and therefore they basically created stereotypes such as unpleasant stereotypes, such as the Nama being associated perhaps with the use of alcohol, amongst others, or the Hereros and the Nama people not want to work. The relation to alcohol is as a consequence of the transgenerational trauma, and we know how close trauma and substance abuse are. And then the not wanting to work mostly does not come from people necessarily being lazy, but this comes from them refusing to work after the genocide. They refused to work for the German communities, for the German farms and whatnot, and the German railroads and all that, and also because their numbers were depleted. We know very well that our communities from the northern part of the country had to be brought in to basically subsidize this labor. And so some of these things are things that most of the Namibians do not historically understand, and therefore negative stereotypes then emanate from that. We have medical issues that have emerged from that. You have all the question of diabetes, hypertension, and things such as anxiety. Most do not understand where it comes from, but it can be traced as a issue of transgenerational trauma from this disease. We have things like assimilation, for instance, of the Namas, or assimilation from the Nama community side, where they do not bear their names anymore. They are from their Nama heritage, but they bear now the names of the Afrikaner, the Dutch, or what, because the Germans could not pronounce their names. So you have the question of identity, loss of culture, both within the Herero and the Nama communities. The Herero community's traditions have been decimated, and they practice what they can remember and what they can make of and what can relate to their traditions, but not necessarily what their forefathers practice. And these are the cultural effects that the genocide has had on these communities, and I can go on and on and on. About.
Well, Joyce, we've been hearing a lot about reparation for Africa. Now, what does it mean in practical terms, and how does it apply to Namibian communities?
Theoretically speaking, reparations is simply to repair the harm perpetrated. And when we speak of reparations for Africa, you will know how Africa has been plundered for years by the West. And so you have, like the theme of the African Union States, you have transatlantic slavery, you have genocide, you have colonialism, and then you have apartheid that was recently declared a crime against humanity. Now, reparations within the international legal framework entails that anybody on whom harm was perpetrated, or especially gross violations, is owed reparations by the perpetrators. The African continent must be repaired by the West in several ways. It's the actual independence. We speak of its political independence, but what Kwame Nkrumah said, of course, you have neo-colonialism, which appears much more closely, but then which put Africa in a position of great dependence still on the West today, even post-conflict or post-colonial, in the post-colonial time.
So, Joyce,
so we need,
yes, continue, please.
Yes. And so repairing Africa will be a very, very, very complex, but it will be possible because then it is needs for us to come at the table as victims of these crimes and having a conversation of negotiations with the West, because we know that it's several countries in the West that colonize several countries. So the process will start with a negotiation, and then it will start with repair according to the harm that was perpetrated in the different African contexts, because the harm was also perpetrated on different levels. In Namibia, in Mali, in Tanzania, in Cameroon, and all the other German colonies, they have experienced genocide. While in South Africa, they have experienced apartheid. In Botswana and other countries, they experience massacres, but also colonialism. And so the extents are different, so it will be different for the repair will be different according to the claims that the people would want there, according to what they have lost. What is most important is that genocide must be proportionate to the harm that was perpetrated. In Namibia, for instance, we have experienced the loss of men. Genocide, reparations has 5 components that must be included when you are talking about reparations to a community or to the victim. You have compensation, you have rehabilitation, you have guarantees of non-repetition, you have restitution, and most importantly, after all these things have taken place, both the victim and the perpetrator must be satisfied with the repair that was. And so the victim must be satisfied with with their demands and what they have demanded from the perpetrator. But then the perpetrator must also be satisfied with the fact that, you know what, I have done everything that I can, I have done everything that I could, and I am happy that I have had. Reparations simply is bringing, it's the sort of, I think I would put it simply like this. Where was the victim before the harm happened? Where is the victim today? And where could the victim be had that harm not being perpetrated? And that is where the victim must be. And that is where Africa should be brought to by the people or by the West that owns Africa its reparation. I hope I have not jibbled a lot, but actually provide some clarity in that regard.